Sharon Wright Austin is a professor at the University of Florida, where she teaches African American Studies and Political Science. Her first book, Race, Power, and Political Emergence in Memphis, was published by Garland Publishing in 2000 under her maiden name, Sharon Wright. Her second book, The Transformation of Plantation Politics, Black Politics, Concentrated Poverty, and Social Capital in the Mississippi Delta, was published by the State University of New York at Albany Press in 2006. A third book, The Caribbeanization of Black Politics, Race, Group Consciousness and Political Participation in America, was also published by SUNY in 2018. In 2023, she co-edited Beyond Racial Capitalism, Cooperatives and the African Diaspora, OxfordUniversityPress, with Caroline Shenaz, Hossein, and Kelvin Edmonds, and edited Political Black Girl Magic, The Elections and Governance of Black Female Mayors. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to have on the show today, Sharon Wright. How are you doing, Sharon?
I'm doing great, and it's quite an honor to be on your show and to have your listeners watching the interview.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well. I'm so excited to have you on the show today. So, Sharon, could you tell us about your book, Political Black Girl Magic, The Elections and Governance of Black Female Mayors? How does this book come about? What inspired you to write Political Black Girl Magic?
I have a copy of the book right here,
Mm.
and it can be found on, I just said it right there, Amazon. It was published by Temple University Press just in June of this year.
Oh,
And if you look at the cover, it has Lori Lightfoot, who is the former mayor of the city of Chicago.
wow.
To answer your question, I decided to write it along with, it's an edited book that I wrote with different authors, and with the different chapters, they're written by different authors, and I wrote some of them with my students. And so I kept reading about Black female mayors. I've been studying Black mayors for many, many years now. When I was in graduate school, in my hometown, the city of Memphis, Tennessee, elected the city's first Black mayor. And that's what my dissertation was about. All of the Black mayors who had run in a predominantly Black city had
Mm.
lost. And finally, in 1991, they finally elected a Black mayor. So that's what my research was about, and also my first book. So I've been studying Black mayors for years, but there had been Black female mayors, but not as many as there are now. And they weren't being elected in the larger cities. And so it recently, especially since 2017, that was the first year in which there were 5 cities that were large cities that had populations of at least probably 100,000 people that had Black female mayors. And so I remember reading about that and just thinking, wow, that really is an interesting topic. And I read an article in Essence magazine about it. And
Mm.
that kind of made me, talk to some of my friends through social media. And I was telling them, I was like, wow, it would be nice if there was a book about that, because there have been books about mayors, female mayors, Black mayors, Hispanic mayors, Asian American mayors, but there had never been one about Black women.
Mm.
And then also there's a growing amount of research on Black women's politics that, I studied that, and so do several of my friends. And so we decided, especially during the pandemic, to just go ahead and just do it as hard as it was in 2020, to go ahead and just, I sent out an email and I asked my friends, like, okay, we're going to do this book. Who wants to cover what city? And I had so much interest in it. And
Wow.
the book was published this year. It's just been great.
Wow, I love the sound of that, and I so much love it. Actually, read quite a lot of things about it on the university's portal, so that got me to have a bit of idea of what it's all about. Now, I also see that Political Black Girl explore Black women's experiences as mayors in American city, with some chapters detailing how Black female mayor governs, and the discussion also on their pursuit of economic growth. Looking deep, they stylishly reflect the call for race and gender equality in governance. And I'm curious to ask you, why is this a crucial theme in your book? What are you trying to achieve with this?
I'm looking at just the campaigns, but also, as you mentioned, the governance and how they govern once they win.
Mm,
And a lot of books in political science that cover different political candidacies look at their campaigns. How do they run for office? But in this one, we look at the cities that they run in, the political obstacles that have been there in those cities, especially for Black people, that kept Black people from voting in the past, that kept Black people from electing people, the obstacles that they had to overcome, the obstacles for women.
mm,
And we look at after the fact that after they win these elections, they then have to govern. They have to get people to support them, hopefully, so
mm,
that they'll be reelected. So that's why we looked at the governance thing. Like, what kind of barriers do they run into is the question we're looking at when they're trying to serve as mayor. And then also, economic growth is something that we focused on because other than crime, I would say that economic growth and probably healthcare and education as well, but economic growth is mostly the issue that citizens are concerned with when they elect a person to office. How is
mm,
this person going to bring jobs and keep jobs
mm,
and make sure that the city has a stable economy? And so that's one of the things that we focused on because as female mayors and as Black female mayors, that's one of the things that the people who elect them expect them to do, make sure that this is not a city that's falling apart economically. So
mm.
that's why we chose that thing.
Wow, that's such an amazing theme to, talk about in a book. It makes it look and read historically, and I love that particularly about it. So that's a great one. Kudos, I'd say.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, your theme of writing also is a bit debateful and critical. And as authors, we all have different ways of reacting to feedbacks and criticism of our works. I'm curious to know your opinion about criticism. How do you react to negative reviews of your books if you've ever had one in time past?
Now, this book just was published, and so
Mm,
far we haven't really had very many reviews, but the feedback has been very positive. I've been promoting the book on different outlets, and recently the city of Philadelphia just elected its first Black female mayor, and I just wrote an op-ed for their newspaper, the Philadelphia Inquirer. I just had a radio interview yesterday, so it's
mm,
always exciting to do this type of work. I'm always blown away when people want to hear what I have to say and want to know about the work that I'm doing. But to answer your question about criticism, I have had criticism of my books in the past, especially my
mm,
first book, because I think for people who are watching this who are authors, if you're writing your first book, it's never going to be perfect, even if you write a million books. But with the first one especially, it's you're always going to have people who are going to say things about it. And with my first book especially, there were some people who didn't like the fact that I talked about race. Memphis, where I'm from, is a very racially polarized city. There have always been major differences between Black people and white people. I remember growing up, seeing it all my life there. And
mm,
when I wrote about the racial polarization and how the fact that for many Black mayors who ran for mayor, they didn't win because white people wouldn't vote for them, regardless of
mm,
who they were or how qualified they were. People didn't like that, and they didn't want to hear that. And so some people would say things like, "Oh, why is she saying that?" And I was like, "Well, because it's true, and I have the data to prove it." And I was like, sometimes Black people would vote for white candidates, but not the other way around.
mm,
So I had to just learn when people say things that, it's just a part of the job. When you write a book, when you do anything that makes you a public person, people are going to like you, but some people aren't. And you just have
mm,
to learn how to respond to it. And you also use some of that criticism to help you. And I've now written 5 books. And with the other books that I wrote, I looked at the critical reviews that people wrote, and I made sure that if it was a mistake on my part, that I didn't make the same mistake in
mm,
other books. So I used it as a way to help me. And also, speaking of criticism with social media, it's so easy now for people to criticize people and be completely anonymous. So that makes it
mm.
totally different. When I first wrote my book in 2000, it wasn't like that. People knew who you were, but now people can just say all kinds of really mean spirited things, and you
Absolutely.
don't know who they are. And
Yeah.
you just have to learn how to just not be confident in yourself and not worry about the negative things.
Mm. Wow. I love your take on criticism. Sounds very educative and quite alert. Yeah, so that's great. I'm able to pick some things there. Thank you so much for sharing. I've always been fascinated about how authors, especially novelists like yourself, craft long sentences, and brings works together in a way that it eventually makes a great novel. This always leave me thinking about how exactly they got their ideas and inspiration. Now, as far as writing is concerned, I too would love to ask you, how do you get your inspiration and ideas?
I get my ideas mostly from just watching the news. I mostly write academic books as a professor.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what we do. I also
Mm.
have a children's book coming out, hopefully early next year. So I would love to do your show again. But I get my inspiration from just thinking about different issues in politics and why those issues are important. For this book, I've always been very committed to learning more about women, especially about women of color, especially about Black women.
Mm.
So I get my inspiration from just things that I see on the news, and with my children's book that's coming out, my inspiration for that one is called Alan Learns to Talk, a story about autism. I have an
Oh,
18-year-old severely autistic son, and I got my inspiration for that book from just over the years when my son couldn't talk. He didn't really talk until he was almost 5. And the
wow.
things that my family and I went through, my husband and I, and trying to teach him how to talk and how to tell kids how to communicate with a child that's nonverbal. So I mostly just get my inspiration from life experiences.
Wow. That's very amazing. I love the sound of that. Very great. Now, I'm also curious to know if you experienced any challenges in the process of writing this book. If there is any, could you share with us what challenge it is and how you ultimately overcame it?
I would say the biggest challenge for this book was COVID.
Oh,
I started looking into it in 2017, but we didn't really actually, we did most of the writing around 2020. I had already gotten the authors together, and
oh,
I was working with some students on some research projects, and they helped me with a couple of the chapters. But then in 2020, in March, everything shut down. And
oh,
so, at the time, my children were teenagers and they were at home with me. And so it was a really difficult time just going through that and having my children at home, being homeschooled and trying to work. My husband was also working from home, and all the things that our entire world was going through during COVID. That was a huge challenge.
oh, that's quite great to know the challenge you encountered and also the COVID. It's a challenge
Hmm.
to most writers and also an avenue for most people to be able to sit down and even write a book. So that's quite great to know.
Right.
Now, is there anything that you'd love to share with the viewers about your book that we did not mention in this interview? I'd love the viewers to know.
I think that the thing that fascinates me about the interview that you're doing is that it'll be shown all over the world, in
Mm,
continents all over the world, and I'm fascinated by that, especially since on the continent of Africa, there are so many women who are involved in politics there. And even though my book is an American book, it talks about the mayors of American cities. I
yeah,
think people who are running for office, whether it be mayor or some other office anywhere in the world, can benefit from it. And I also think that women of color, especially Black women all over the
yeah,
world, can learn from the experiences of these women because I'm sure in some cases women have similar problems everywhere. So I'm
absolutely.
just blown away by the fact that you have so many people listening all over the world to your show.
Yeah, thank you. That's quite great to know. And I'd also love to ask you, Sharon, as a published author, what sort of advice do you have for other writers who are still struggling with publishing a book? What would you advise people in this category?
I would say for authors who are struggling to write a book, one problem that's common for writers is writer's block. And
Mm,
if you go through a phase in which you I just can't get your thoughts together, you have this great idea and you want to write your book, but you can't get your thoughts together, just really walk away from it for as long as you need to. Try not to put yourself under a pressure of deadlines and just
absolutely.
walk away and just do whatever you enjoy doing and then come back to it and your
Mm,
thoughts will come back. But don't stress yourself out. And then also, you talked about criticism. Just be able to distinguish the constructive criticism that can help you from people just being mean spirited or petty.
mm,
Depending on what you're writing about, sometimes people just don't want to hear about certain topics like race or gender or other types of issues. They don't like
Absolutely.
those topics,
Yeah.
but just make sure you speak your truth.
Oh, I love that. I love the sound of it. And I'm hopeful that viewers, including myself, would love to utilize it. Now, in case we have some interested viewers who are watching this and would love to get a copy of your book, on what platform are they available on for purchase?
The book, I have it again. I'll show it. Love to
Yeah,
show off the book. But
yeah,
again, the title of it is Political Black Girl Magic: The Elections and Governance of Black Female Mayors. It was published this year by Temple University Press. So you can
wow,
go to their website. Temple University is in Philadelphia. You can also publish it on Amazon. Or if you just do a search of my name, Sharon Austin, Political Black Girl Magic, it'll show you a lot of different places where you can order it online.
yeah. That's great. And I love to link in the discussion part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Sharon's Wright books directly on Amazon and also on the university's Porter website. So thank you so much, Sharon, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. It's awesome having this conversation with you.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a pleasure being here with you.
Yeah, my dear as well.